Yesterday I finished to say Kaddish after my father, Moiri, my father, my teacher, Zechino Levracha. And tonight's Shir is Muktish Leilu Nishmosei. And in fact we will be saying L'chaim and some Farbeisen also tonight. The Rebbe Zilgezinsan began the Farbrengen this afternoon that really there are several inyanim combined in today's day. And when we begin to search what to discuss, especially what to choose first to discuss on a day like today, we definitely hope that the Rebishter will help us and we will search and we will find the proper inyanim what to discuss. Especially that the inyanim which we discuss are inyanim that lead to hamaisa hu ha'ika, inyanim that lead to deeds and action, which this is above, supersedes everything. And more particular, being that these heroes lessons which we are going to derive from the inyanim which we are going to discuss are not only b'negeya an individual, but it is negeya, it is relevant to more than an individual. It is negeya, it's relevant to the public. So with the help of the Rebishter, we will search and definitely find the proper and suitable inyanim to discuss regarding the meaning of today's date. Especially based on what the Medrash tells us on the pasuk L'maise yodecha tichseif, that the Rebishter has a desire, a deep desire, and an enjoyment from the maise yodav of Yidden. In other words, from the action and from the deeds of the Yidden, the Rebishter gets a special enjoyment. So Memela, when we are choosing an inyan looking for an inyan to discuss, and this is an inyan which will definitely lead to deed and action to Maisa. So this will bring about an enjoyment, a tremendous enjoyment and satisfaction by the Rebbe Shalom. And here the Rebbe mentioned there's a taich from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Frierdiker Rebbe teiches that there's a Gemara. Gemara says that Gemara discusses what will happen in the days of Ikvis the Mashiach before Mashiach comes. The Gemara says various negative inyanim which will be happening then, undesirable inyanim. Then the Gemara mentions that Yidden will express themselves Anu ein lanu lihishayin ela lavinu shabashamayim, that we can rely only on the Rebishter. So the Frierdiker Rebbe teaches, though obviously this seems a very positive thought, people saying that we will rely on the Rebishter. So the Rebbe teaches that in this thought, it is also an undesirable thought. Why? Because Yidden have to do. We have to do ourselves. We can't sit back and say that we will rely on the Rebishter. So we have to do things ourselves. And Memela, we have to look and search for a suitable inyanim. So the Rebbe again gets back to the inyan, for suitable inyanim that have a shaykhus to today's day, and look for the lessons we can derive from this inyan. So the Rebbe says that to look for something and find something which has a shaykhus to today's day, we have a pasuk mefurish, an open pasuk in the Torah. Regarding something which is spelled out in an open pasuk, the Rebbe refers to today's shir on the Rambam. The Rambam today will learn about hilchas mamrim, somebody who is a mamri, somebody who rebels and goes against Torah. So there the Rambam discusses that there's a concept in Gemara, bedover shahatzdukim moidem boy, something which even the tzdukim also agree to What is this? Anything which is a pasuk mefurish, something which is spelled out clear in the Torah, this is something which the tzdukim also adhere to. So regarding today's date, we have something so clear that something that it's spelled out, it's a mefurish pasuk. And that is, in Chumash Devarim, where the Torah talks about Moshe Rabbeinu, and there the Torah tells us that be'echod lachodesh, the first day in the month, be'ashtei asa chodesh, and the 11th month, which is the month of Shvat, when we count from Nisan, hoyil Moshe bayer es ha-Torah hazois. This is the day when Moshe began to explain Torah. And Rashi right away comments what is meant by Moshe explaining Torah. That Moshe began translating Torah into 70 languages. When did Moshe begin this? On the day of Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Until when did he do this? Till Zayin Odor. Because that is the day when he passed away. So a period of close to 40 days, Moshe was involved in translating Torah. And the Rebbe stresses, it wasn't something which he did for 1 day, or for 2 days, or 3 days, or even 30 days. In Halacha we find the concept of 30 days. We find the concept of a week is a weekly cycle. 30 days is also an inyan in Halacha. This is much more than that. Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in it for a period of close to 40 days, until Zayin Odor. But again, this was only the beginning of translating Torah. The continuation of translating Torah, this is something which went on to later generations, and something which is a continuity, which ad hayom hazeh, until this day, it is our inyan to continue this thing which Moshe began on Rosh Chodesh Shvat and translating Torah. What is the meaning of translating Torah? By translating Torah, it means that we are reaching out with Torah to those Yidden who cannot understand Torah in its original text, in its original language, but we are reaching out to them that they too should have a shaychus to Torah. And this is something which we today have to continue, especially when we're talking on a day like today, which this is the day when Moshe began this whole inyan, on the day of Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So the lesson which we can derive from this is extremely obvious, it's extremely spelled out, very, very clear, and it's a lesson of such which is brought down into Maisa, into deed and action right away. And this is the inyan of spreading Torah and reaching out with Torah to each and every Yid, and see to it that every Yid has a shaychus to Torah. Then the Rebbe continued, we know, as he already explained at previous occasions, that the shiurim, which we learn every day, have a very obvious shaychus to the day when the shiurim are learned. And this applies to the shiurim of Chitas, and it applies also to the shiur of Rambam. And the Rebbe says throughout the Farbrengens we had many occasions to explain the Parsha Chumash, how the Parsha of the day has a shaychus to the day. However, he almost has never spoken about how the shiur of Tilim also has a shaychus to the day when the shiur of Tilim is recited. The Rebbe says obviously it doesn't bother anybody that he doesn't refer to the Shir Tilim and explain the lesson which we can derive from the Shir Tilim. And he compared it is explained in Chassidus based on Halacha that min ha-Torah there's an obligation of tefillah min ha-Torah. We're obligated to daven to the Eibishter. When are we obligated to daven? So Halacha tells us that min ha-Torah, in other words, midaraisa, we're obligated to daven when we have a bakoshas rochov, when we're asking the Eibishter for something specific, we need something specific, we are only allowed to request it from the Eibishter, and that is when we daven to the Eibishter. This is how the status of tefillah min ha-Torah. Naturally, the Chachamim later have set on a daily arrangement of tefillah and a daily text of tefillah and so forth. But the way tefillah stands min ha-Torah, it is for bakoshas rochov. So the Rebbe is comparing, he says, being that nobody asks for him to get involved and explain the Shir Tilim is a simon. We are not lacking it. Because when we lack for something, when we need something, that's when we ask for it. If we don't need it, that's when we don't ask. But truly, we know in truth that the Frierdiker Rebbe has arranged, and not only has he arranged, but he made popular the inyan of the shiurim of chitas, and in it as well the shiur of saying tilim on a daily basis. And this is something which originated by all of the Rabbeim, by all of the Nasiim, back to the Baal Shem Tov, that all of them would recite the Yom Tilim on a daily basis. Regarding today's date, today we are the first day of the month. And the first day of the month, we begin the Tehillim. We begin Tehillim. So let us look right away at the beginning. The first kapitel, which is the beginning of the Yom. How does the Tehillim begin? Ashrei Ho'ish. So there's a Medrash. Medrash tells us, Bamedisayim Moshe David Posach. That what Moshe concluded, David began. What does this mean? If we look into Chumash V'Zois HaBaracha, into Devarim, we will notice how Moshe Rabbeinu, in his last days, is concluding with the words, Ashrecha Yisrael. Praised are you, Yisrael. So being that Moshe concluded with the word Ashrecha, so David, Amelech, also begins with the same word, Ashrei, which is the same word, Ashrei. Praised is the person. He's praising Yidden, and David is saying, praised is the man, Ashalei halach b'atzas rishoy. So the Rebbe asks a very obvious question. What is the contact between Moshe and David? Why did David choose to continue his Tillim, make his Tillim a continuation to what Moshe concluded with? Between Moshe and David, there were many Nevi'im, there were many prophets. We look into now. Right after Moshe came Yeshua, then there were other prophets. David does not refer back to them. However, whom did David choose to refer back to make his Sefer Tillim a continuation to a statement of Moshe Rabbeinu? So the Rebbe is explaining. Therefore, we must say that there's something in common between Moshe and David. And because of this, David saw it suitable to make his Tillim a continuation to the sayings of Moshe Rabbeinu. What is it? Extremely obvious. Something which is understood to a 5-year-old child. Moshe Rabbeinu took Yidden out of Mitzrayim, which means Moshe Rabbeinu was the Goyel Rishon. He took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. We are told in Chazal that would Yidden be fortunate, then the Geula of Moshe Rabbeinu would have been an eternal one. We say in the Shira, Tivieimoi v'sitoeimoi b'har nach lasecha, that the Rabbeinu Shloim is bringing us into Har nach lasecha to Eretz Yisrael. This entering Eretz Yisrael could have been something eternal. As we conclude Taka in the Shira, Hashem yimloich lo'ilam v'ed. Lo'ilam v'ed is an expression of eternity. However, we were not fortunate enough, and that is why the going into Eretz Yisrael was something which was not eternal, and later we went into Galus again. In fact, with this we can understand an Indian in these Sedras. Last week we learned how Moshe Rabbeinu complained to the Rabbeinu Shalom that he is not the proper person to go to Parah and take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. What did he say? Shlachna biyat tishlach. Send with somebody else. So Chazal interpret, what did Moshe mean by Shlachna biyat tishlach? Send somebody who will, in other words, Mashiach. Send somebody who will lead them to the final Geula. Why send me? If we look into the Psukim of Chumash, we will notice that on all of his complaints, the Rabbeinu Shalom answered. He complained that he's a kvat peh, it's hard for him to talk, and all of this the Rebbe answered. And the fact that he stated, Shlachna biyat tishlach,
which as Chazal interpret, it means send somebody who will be taking them for the eternal Geula, and don't send me, the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't answer him on that. Why didn't the Rebbe answer on that? This is an indication, the Rebbe says, because at the level Yidden stood at that time, and the same level Moshe stood at that time, it could have very well been that Moshe would be the one that is taking them out of Goles and bringing them and leading them into a Geula of such which is an eternal Geula. So that is why the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't respond anything to this complaint of Moshe Rabbeinu. On the contrary, because at that time Moshe was the person who would have taken the Yidden out of Galus, and it would have been a Geula Shleim. But lo zachinu, we weren't fortunate enough, and that is why we went later again into Galus. What is David's inyan? David's inyan is also Geula. As we know, we recite in Kiddush Levana, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. Mashiach is associated with David. Memele. That is why David saw it suitable to continue Bameh Desayim Moshe, with what Moshe concluded. Moshe concluded with Ashrecha Yisrael, and David began with Ashrei Hoish, because there is something very obvious and common between David and Moshe. And what is it? That both of them, Sai Moshe and Sai David, their inyan is Giyul. Here in this inyan, when the Rebbe was talking about this, Rebbe began talking about the importance of every Jewish child. The Rebbe brought out that we see how every Yid is dear by the Eibishter, to such an extent that a Jewish child, as soon as the child is born, he has the status of a Yid, and to such an extent that we know there are halachas of pikuach nefesh, which means that if a person is sick, and it's a question of rescuing his life, everyone, mamish everyone, is allowed to get involved, and if they can only be helpful, to save his life. Who is considered a person when we're talking about rescuing one's life? We're talking about a day-old child, a Yiddish kind who was just born, has no qualifications yet. We don't know anything special about him. All we know is that this is a Jewish child. And the fact that we know that this is a Jewish child, this is enough of a reason. This is enough of a reason that we are allowed to do in Yonim of Pikuach Nefesh, B'machalul Shabbos, B'machalul Yontef, do in Yonim to save this child's life. And everyone is allowed to do it. Even a Kohen Gadol, who is busy Yom Kippur with doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, and entering Lefnai Lefnim he's permitted to enter and get involved. He's there as an emissary of Klal Yisrael to do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. He too, if it comes out to be circumstances where he is the one that can rescue the life of a newborn Jewish baby, he is to stop what he is doing, which means An Yom Kippur, the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, stop that and go ahead and be involved in helping and reaching out and helping to save the life of a Jewish child. Here we see how dear the life of a Yid is, and how dear a Yid is, and every Yid is, regardless of his Maimed HaMatzav, regardless of his situation, how dear every Yid is by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Later in the Farbrengen, as usual, that the Rebbe continues explaining two Rashis in this week's Sedre, and also the Inyan in Shia Rambam, in today's Shia of the Rambam. Today the Rebbe spoke an Inyan based on the Haftorah, which is recited today, which is the Haftorah of Rosh Chodesh. In the Haftorah of Rosh Chodesh, the Navi says, Koyom Ar Hashem, Hashomayim Kisi, V'ha'oretz Hadoim Ragli. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, Shamayim, heaven is his seat, is his chair, and V'ha'oretz, and on the earth, this is his footstool. And then the pasuk continues, Eize bayis asher tivnu li, ve'eize makoim menuchasi. Where is the house that can be built for me, and where is my place of rest? The Rebbe says this has a very strong relation to the inyanim which we are discussing lately. We're talking lately about the importance of building Batei Chabad houses. Talking it on a general level, meaning general Chabad houses. And as the Rebbe again stressed, as he keeps on stressing, that what is the inyan of a Chabad house is a house that excels in all three categories of Torah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. Also, private Chabad houses, meaning how everyone should see to it that their own homes, their own residence, say adults, and particularly the Rebbe referred many occasions talking particularly about children, that their rooms should be a Chabad house. Meaning that to excel in our own homes in all of these three areas of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chesed. And actually, this is what the Navi says. How great HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. That Hashamayim Kisi. For V'ha'aretz Hadoim Ragli. Actually, this is a description on the greatness of the Rebishter. That Shamayim Kisi, his chair is on Shamayim, and his feet reach to that where is Hadoim Ragli, where is his footstool on the Aretz, here on this on Aretz. And there's a tremendous span between Shamayim and Aretz. Still the Rebishter continues, Eize bayis asher tivnu li. What is the most suitable bayis? Eize bayis, it's a question. What is the suitable bayis asher tivnu li that should be built to the Rebishter? And what is that? Naturally the Rebbe continued, this is the inyan of a Beis Chabad. However, the Navi continues, Ve'eize mokim menuchasi. Where is my place of rest? In other words, we see that there are two levels. We're talking about a bayis, a suitable bayis for the Rebishter, and at the same time it also has to be a place of menucha, a place of rest. What is the double expression? So here the Rebbe referred to something. He says, on one hand he's been demanding about opening more and more Chabad houses, and stressing the importance of opening Chabad houses, but at the same time all of this has to be done in accordance with halacha. And to open a Chabad house, at the time it may hurt somebody who is in that specific city, or that specific area, or that specific neighborhood, or whatever the case may be, and to hurt him in parnasa, hurt him in his earnings, or to hurt him to the extent that this may force him to leave town and go to another city. This is definitely not the intention of opening Chabad house. The intention of opening Chabad houses, Batei Chabad, is not to hurt any Yid whatsoever. Getting back to the inyan of Asei Lecha Rav, everybody is obligated to have a Rav. And we are not permitted to make decisions on our own. When we have a question, we have to ask. Ask a Rav, ask a Dayan, check with somebody. Don't do things on your own, the Rebbe stresses. And when we stress with somebody, and we get the right answer, then we know what we are to do. There's 4 halakim of Shulchan Aruch, and we have to act in accordance to all 4 halakim of Shulchan Aruch. And then there's a famous expression that there's a 5th chelik Shulchan Aruch. There's a 5th part of Shulchan Aruch as well. The world has an expression that there's 4 halakim of Shulchan Aruch, Chaim, Yeredesh, Shreshi Mishpat, and Even Ezer. However, the 5th part of Shulchan Aruch is common sense, seichel. And things have to be done in accordance with seichel. And if there's anything that can be done when the Chabad house is opened, and it hurts somebody in any way whatsoever, this is not the intention of opening a Chabad house. The intention of opening a Chabad house is not to bring harm to anybody in any shape whatsoever. The Rebbe stressed this very, very strongly. On the other hand, the Rebbe said, when there's an opportunity of opening Chabad houses in new areas, the people that are in those areas should not turn their heads away and not be willing to assist and claim that they are doing it and there's no need for somebody else to get involved and so forth. if there's only room for somebody to come in and add on more and give more chayis and lebedigkeit to the activities that are going on, and the Rebbe kept on stressing that we are talking about adding new Chabad houses as well as expanding the existing Chabad houses. So all of these in Yonim, but we should remember that everything has to be done in a way of drocher, darkei noyam, in a way of peace, v'chol nisiveseha sholem, all their paths, the paths of Torah are all in a format of peace. Everything has to be done in a proper way. Talking about the union of individual Chabad houses, the Rebbe referred to the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, "V'osu li mikdash v'shechanti b'soicham." We shall make a Beis HaMikdash, and the Rebbe says that the Shechina will be dwelling amongst them. So we all know the famous Chazal, "B'soichoi loy nemar ela b'soicham." The Pasuk does not say that the Rebbe, the Shechina, will rest in it. The Pasuk says the Shechina will rest amongst them, meaning b'soich kol echad ve'echad. So the Rebbe says, Torah b'pirusha nitna. When the Rebbe gave Torah to Yidden, he included not only the written Torah, but Torah Shebal Peh as well. The oral Torah was also given when Torah was given. So Memela, this interpretation regarding va'asu limikdash, how the Shechina dwells on this world, this is all part of the interpretation of the Pasuk as the Pasuk was given Misinai. So Memela, what does this mean? That there is the V'shachanti b'soicham in every Jewish home. In every Jewish home, there's an union of the Shechina resting there. There's Getlichkeit there. The Rebbeinu Shalom dwells in every single home, and this is the grounds of what we're talking about. What we're talking about, how every home can be a Chabad house, a Beis Chabad, based on the Pasuk. There's a Pasuk in Novi. Hashamayim mushmei hashamayim lo yechalkelucha va'af ki abayis hazeh. The heavens and heavens of heavens cannot accommodate you. And is it this house that can accommodate you? We're talking about the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, the Rebbeinu Shalom, how great he is. That Shamayim Ushmei HaShamayim Lo Yechalkelucha. The heavens cannot accommodate him. Shamayim and Shemei HaShamayim. However, Avki Habayis Hazeh, it is this house, talking about the Beis HaMikdash, that does accommodate the Rebbeinu Shalom. Memela, when we're talking about it in the terms of Beis HaMikdash, beginning with Mishkan, then later Beis HaMikdash, and now it is in a way how every single house can be in such a way. And by each and every mitzvah that a Yid fulfills, a Yid brings lichtigkeit into this world. And as the Rebbe stresses, there are those mitzvahs that we fulfill them through lichtigkeit. For example, lighting Shabbos licht and lighting the Chanukah menorah, which these mitzvahs are lighting lichtigkeit. So these mitzvahs definitely bring lichtigkeit into the world. But all other mitzvahs as well, by each and every mitzvah that a Yid is mekayim, he brings light, spiritual light into this world. He illuminates the world spiritually by each and every mitzvah that he fulfills. And Memela, this is the great inyan, how each and every one of us can turn our homes and our rooms and our children's rooms, all of this is turned into a Beis Chabad, and the idea of it is a base, Eize Bayis Asher Tivnuli. This corresponds to what the Navi says in today's Haftarah, that this is the house which the Rebbe asks, what is the house that shall be built for me? Where is my place of rest? So the Rebbe is like adding on that the where is my place of rest? When is it a proper place of rest for the Rebbeinu Shalom? That is when it is built in accordance to halacha. Getting back to what we discussed before, that it does not cause any hasagas gvul, it does not hurt anybody, it does not hurt anybody in parnosa and so forth. Doesn't cause any aggravation to people. That is when it is a mokem menuchasi. So both of these inyanim come together. Side bayis asher tivnuli, the Beis Hashem. What is the Beis Hashem? The inyan of a Beis Chabad, and it is done in accordance of a mokem menuchasi, in a place of rest. In other words, not causing any aggravation or anything wrong, anything which is contrary to halacha by doing that. The Rebbe says his intention was not by requesting to expand Chabad houses and era new Chabad houses. This should chas v'shalom lead to things which are contrary to halacha. Now let us go into the interpretations of the Rashis in this week's Sedra. Based on what the Rebbe has learned until now, the rules in Rashi are, which we all know, that first Rashi explained the pshat of the pasuk. If, for whatever reason, there is still something lacking in the pshat, that is when Rashi may quote a medrash as well. However, first and foremost, what is Rashi's inyan? Pshat. In this week's Sedra, we have two Rashis that are very strange. One is before Sheni, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Kapitel Vav, Pasuk Yud Gimel. And then the pasuk says, "Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron." Hashem spoke to Moshe and to Aaron. Vayitzavim, He commanded them el bnei Yisrael regarding the Yidden vel Pari melech Mitzrayim, and also with a message to Pari melech Mitzrayim. If we look into Rashi vel Pari melech Mitzrayim, we find. Let us look into Rashi. Rashi says, "Tzivam olav." He commanded them lachloik loikavoid b'divrayim, that when they talk to Pari, they should talk respectful to Pari. Is it suitable to talk to a king? What does Rashi tell us right after that? Zehu midrashay. This is a medrash. In other words, this is not a simple pshat in the pasuk. This is a drash. Upshutoy. What is the pashat pshat in the pasuk? Tzivam. He commanded them al devar Yisrael, that they should take care of the Yidden, and about their message val shlichusay al Pari, and about his message to Pari. Very obvious question. First, Rashi should tell us the pshat. If for whatever reason, because of a certain question, or because of something which is bothering us in the pasuk, the pshat is insufficient, that is when Rashi gets involved in quoting a medrash. But to quote the drash first and later the pshat, this is not the derech of Rashi. The Rebbe says we must learn the inyan of Rashi here is, as in all over, what is Rashi's inyan? Rashi's inyan is that we shall understand the general idea of the psukim. Then Rashi gets involved in details. The general idea of the psukim is what? That the Rebishter was sent, has chosen Moshe, and has told him, as we learned in this week's Sedra, and we learned in last week's Sedra, that the situation of the Yidden has reached to him, and he's well aware how the Yidden, Na'akas b'nei Yisrael, the screaming of the Yidden, the krachzen of the Yidden, the sighing of the Yidden has reached him, and therefore he has selected Moshe, that the time has come that Moshe should go and take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. So what is the main inyan of Moshe's going to Mitzrayim? His main inyan is dealing with Pari. Dealing with Pari and seeing to it that Pari would let the Yidden go out of Mitzrayim. That is first and foremost Moshe's task, to see to it that he works out all the arrangements with Pari, that Pari should agree to release the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. Therefore, now that we're learning here Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron, Hashem is talking to Moshe and to Aaron, Vayitzavim el bnei Yisrael vel Pari melech Mitzrayim. So what is the main inyan? What Moshe is going for? The main inyan, what Moshe is going for, is that he has to address Pari. So though this is not the Pashat Pshat of the Pasuk, this is a drash, as Rashi himself says. However, in this particular situation, Rashi has to give preference to the drash above the Pshat. Why? Because the drash lends itself to explain the general idea what Moshe went for. First Rashi quotes the drash, the medrash, that primarily Moshe went to Mitzrayim to meet Pari and to negotiate with Pari, that Pari will let the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. However, there is a pashat pshat in the pasuk here also, that he was also told how to deal with the Yidden, not only how to deal with Pari, but how to go about and prepare the Yidden, that the Yidden should go out of, prepare them for the Giyul. Now let us go to the second Rashi. Second Rashi is regarding the plague of Tzvardeya. When we learn regarding the plague of Tzvardeya, the pasuk uses the expression Vatal HaTzvardeya. Tzvardeya came up. So Rashi, that is in Pasuk
Beis Kapitel Ches. Before Chamishi, between Revi and Chamishi. Kapitel Ches, Pasuk Beis. Vatal HaTzvardeya. What does Rashi say? Pasuk says, the Tzvardeya came up, the frog. Single expression. Tzvardeya Achasoisa. It was really only one frog. V'hayu Makinoisa. V'himatezes Nechilim. Each time this frog would be hit, it would produce more and more frogs. What does Rashi add on? Zehu midrashi. This is a drash. Upshutoi. What is the Pashat Pshat? Yeshloima shirut satzvardim. The multiplication of the tzvardim is expressed in a singular expression. Vatal hatzvardei. But again, Rashi quotes the Medrash first and later the Pshat. Why? Again, with the same formula which we used in the previous Rashi. Rashi has to give us to understand first the inyan, the general inyan of the psukim. The general idea of the psukim is how the Rabbeinu Shalom brought the plagues into Mitzrayim, and the pasuk is always stressing that this was a plague which the Chartumei Mitzrayim, the Paro's magicians, couldn't have imitated. And we'll always notice that they were able to do part of the Makkah, but some part of the Makkah they were not able to do. And the pasuk always keeps on stressing what they were not able to do. For example, it comes after Tzvardeya, we come to Kinim. So the pasuk says, pasuk Yudalet, that Vayasu Keina Chartumim, they also tried to do the same, and they couldn't. And Rashi gives us the reason why, because they cannot have a ruling over something which is less than Kesayra, something which is less than the size of a bean. But regardless, we notice the trend of the psukim all along is to stress the specialty of the Makkah, what the Rebishter wanted to plague the Mitzrim, and something which their own people couldn't do. Memela, when we learn here Vatal HaTzvardeya. So true, there are two ways we can approach the pasuk. One, which is the second pshat, which is the Pashat Pshat. We can also learn the drash, the medrash, which Rashi brings as the first pshat. Why does Rashi bring that as the first pshat? Because this is an added pshat, gives us an additional, a deeper look, a deeper insight in what's going on here in the Makkos. That not only was it just that Mitzrayim was flooded with frogs, but as the Rebbe used the expression, neis b'toich neis, one miracle tied into the other miracle. That something more than that happened. What also happened? That this individual, Tzvardeya, kept on producing more and more tzvardim, more and more frogs. By each time that this Tzvardeya was hit, more and more frogs were reproduced from it, through it. What does this show us? This shows us another step in the nest. That it wasn't just a Vatal HaTzvardeya, that the Rebishter spread tzvardim over Mitzrayim, plagued the Mitzrayim with frogs, but an additional illness that each time a frog was hit, more and more frogs came out of that. So this is a pshat, though it is a medrash, but when we want to understand the general idea of the psukim, this medrash enlightens us to understand the approach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu by plaguing the Mitzrayim. Then Rashi tells us you should know this is a medrash, and the simple pshat, we know that the multiplication of tzefardim, of the multiplication of frogs, can be expressed in the pasuk in a singular expression. And with this, the Rebbe says, with this interpretation, we can also understand the Makkah of Dam. What happened by the Makkah of Dam? Their waters turned into blood. Then we learn in the pasuk, Vayasu chein chatume Mitzrayim, pasuk Chav Beis, in Kapitel Zayin, that the Egyptians were also capable of doing the same. What did they do? Vayachperu, let us go to pasuk Chav Daled. Vayachperu chol Mitzrayim svives hayoyer mayim lishtos. What they did was, they dug around the waters, and there they found water, and this water they were able to drink. Something very strange. The waters from the rivers of Mitzrayim, they weren't able to drink. If they would go ahead and dig for water around these waters, they would find water, and this water would be drinkable to them. What's going on here? If the Rebishter wants them that they should be able to drink the water, why can't they drink from the water from the river? So that water they can't drink. That water is blood. We know that there is a medrash. The medrash says that how were the Mitzrim able to survive during the plague of dam? A person cannot survive for a week without water. So the medrash says that the Mitzrim had to buy water from the Yid. The Rebbe says Rashi does not bring this pshat, and according to the realm of Pshutei Shel Mikra, when we're learning pshat, it is hard to say, it is not mentioned anywhere, and it's hard to say such a pshat that the Mitzrim were acquiring water from the Yid. So the question is back, where did they get their water? So the pasuk tells us, what did they do? They made ditches around the waters, there they found water, and this is what they drank. So as just mentioned, if the Rebbeinu wanted them to have water, they could have had the water from the Yoyev. They could have had the water, the original water. The original water tasted like dam, that they couldn't drink. But if they went ahead and dug for water around the waters, that water they were able to drink. Rebbe is learning, this is part of the Makkah, this is part of the Nes. How? Rashi tells us. Why was the first Makkah the Makkah of dam? First Makkah was the Makkah of dam because the Rebbeinu wanted to plague them, wanted to plague their Getchke first, being that they all worshipped the Nile. So the Rebbeinu wanted to plague what they believed in first. As we learn in Rashi, it's Rashi in Chazarah that this is their approach. First he plagued what they believe in. Then finally he came to plague them personal. By doing it in such a way, on the contrary, here the Rebbeinu is showing that he's plaguing their God, what they are believing in. So when they are taking water from the Oyer, which is their Getchke, which this is what they believe in, that water they can't drink. Because that is their Oyer, their Nile, the waters is their God, and that the way the Mitzrim believed in, what the Mitzrim believed in, and that is plagued by the Rebbeinu. However, if they go ahead and dig for water around the Oyer, this is already not what they are worshipping to. So the Rebbeinu did not want that water should also be plagued, and that water should also taste like dam. That was not the intention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The intention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to show that whom is he plaguing first? Yerosam, whom they are fearing, which means whom they are believing in, which is the Yair. However, when they were Yachperu Kol Mitzrayim, when all the Mitzrim went ahead and they were digging Svivos HaYair around the water, and then they found water, this they were able to drink. However, from the water from the Nile, from the water of the river, that they couldn't drink. Why couldn't they drink that? Because that was plagued. That tasted like dam. And that was their getchke, that was what they believed in. And the Rebbeinu wanted to plague Yerosam, what they feared from first. However, the waters around it, when they went ahead and dug around, this is, on the contrary, this is proving the intention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is proving what the Rebbeinu wanted to do by the first Makkah, how he wanted the system, what the Rebbeinu wanted, and how he went from the first Makkah to the second Makkah, that the first Makkah was what? That he should plague Yerosam, he should plague the one whom they are fearing from, which means the Yair. However, when they were Chayfer, when they dug Svivos HaYair, this they were able to drink. Today's Shir of the Rambam, the Rebbe mentioned that the month of Shvat, we will have the Siyam on the Rambam. In fact, it is on Yud Shvat when we complete the Rambam, according to those that learn 3 Prakim a day, as well as those that are learning 1 Perik a day and began 3 years ago. The Siyam will be Yud Shvat. In the halachas of Mamrim, the Rambam tells us who is considered, in today's Shir, who is considered a Zokn Mamri, and one who has rebelled against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we read in the Torah how he has to be punished. So the Rambam tells us that when does one have the status of a Zokn Mamri, that is, if he came up with something, with a psak, with a opinion in halachic opinion, on an issue b'davar shezdoinoi koras v'shigigosei chatos, which means on a specific aveira, which when we will do this aveira intentionally, the one who does the aveira gets koras, and if he did it unintentionally, shigigosei b'shoigig, he has to bring a chatos. If he went ahead, this zaken, this person, paskin, against the Torah in such a halacha, then the Rambam says he has the status of a zaken mamre. The Rambam goes further and says, what would be the case if he was to paskin regarding a financial issue? It's mominous, dina mominous. However, this financial issue could ultimately lead to a question where we will have zdoinei koros v'shigigosei chatos. In this financial issue as it stands itself, there's no penalty of koros when it's done intentionally, and there's no korban chatos when it's done unintentionally. However, by issuing a psak on this money, who this money belongs to, and he will, for example, use this money for some particular cause, and when he uses it and gets involved into something, then it may come to a case of zdainei koros v'shigigosei chatos. So the Rambam tells us that as long as it can lead in any way through a long chain of events, that it can lead to zdainei koros v'shigigosei chatos, the Rambam says it carries the status of a zdoinei koros v'shigigosei chatos case. And if he came up with an opinion against the opinion of Torah, he is treated like a zaken mamre, and all the details, what a zaken mamre, punishments of a zaken mamre, which we read about in the Torah. So the Rebbe questioned this concept. So it's hard to understand, because normally we know in Torah that there's halachas of mammon, there's halachas of finances, there's halachas of issa, and we don't mingle one with the other. The fact that it may, at the end result, lead to a case of zdoinei koros v'shigigosei chatos, this is not a reason that it should be treated initially as such a case. Then we find in the Rambam another thing. The Rambam says there's one exception. If, regarding the mitzvah of tefillin, he would come up and say that instead of having 4 parshas in tefillin, we should have 5 parshas in tefillin. Even though tefillin is not something which is zdoinei koros v'shigigosei chatos, for coming up with such a psak. Let us imagine if somebody would put on tefillin with 5 batim instead of 4. The shalrosh will have 5 compartments. He will not be punished an einish of koros if he does it intentionally, and he will not have to bring a chatos if he does it unintentionally. So the Rambam tells us the halacha of tefillin is an exception. That if he comes up, it's in Perek Dalet halacha gimel of Hilches Mamre, if he suggests, passes, to make an additional parsha in tefillin, he has the din of a zaken mamre. So the Rebbe asks, why tefillin different than any other thing in the Torah? Why tefillin? Rebbe explains as follows. We know there's a halacha, ha'oisik b'mitzvah poter min ha'mitzvah. If somebody is involved in one mitzvah, he's poter, he's not obligated to do the other mitzvah. We're not getting involved into the details. There are halachic ramifications for this expression. But in general, if a person is doing one mitzvah, he's not involved. He doesn't have to stop what he's doing. Again, let us not forget there are definitely exceptions to this, but this is the general thought. He does not have to stop what he's doing. He can continue what he's doing, and he doesn't have to do another mitzvah. So Hasidus explains why is this so. Why? And the reason is given. What is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is an expression of the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Chassidus says that all mitzvahs, every one is included from another. Why? Because the idea of mitzvahs is the same. The idea of mitzvahs is to fulfill the wish of the Rebishter. Mitzvahs, Chassidus Taiches Meloshen Tzafsa v'chibur. By doing a mitzvah, we're becoming attached to the Rebishter. So all mitzvahs are tied in one with another. So the fact that he's not going to do the other mitzvah, he's not going to be lacking anything. Why is he not going to be lacking anything? Because he's doing another mitzvah. And as long as the goal is the same of becoming associated with the Rebishter, becoming united with the Rebishter, and that is there. So why should he stop what he's doing and get involved in another mitzvah? All mitzvahs are included one with another. Same the Rebbe says, regarding the halachas of Zokin Mamrei, the Rambam wanted to choose one mitzvah which is a general mitzvah. And if this Zokin, if this person, it's called a Zokin because obviously he knows how to learn. He knows how to learn and he goes against it. That's why he's called Mamrei. He's rebelling against what he knows. This Zokin Mamrei is coming out with a psak against a general mitzvah. What is a mitzvah that is consistent of all of mitzvahs? The most appropriate thing which the Rambam could choose is tefillin. Why? Because we are told, Huksha kol ha-Torah kula tefillin. The mitzvah of tefillin is compared to the entire Torah. If the Rambam is looking to find a general mitzvah, there is no more general mitzvah than tefillin. There's no better general mitzvah than tefillin. So that is why the Rambam tells us that if this Zokei Mamre comes up with a psak to make 5 batim in tefillin, not only 4 components in the Shel Rosh, but to add on a 5th one, or the same in the Shel Yad, then he has the status of a Zokei Mamre, and all the dinim of a Zokei Mamre he has to be treated with. Talking about the importance of tefillin, the Rebbe referred to the whole Indian, the importance of Miftzah tefillin, and that is why for years that the Rebbe said he's sturming, he's making a lot of noise and demanding very strongly that we get involved and see to it that every Yid puts on tefillin and reach out to Yidden that they put on tefillin. Here the Rebbe referred to a pasuk we find by the Bnei God, find a pasuk in the Torah, V'toraf zroya af kotkoid. Torah tells us that the Bnei God, when they went into a milchama, they were so successful that they were able by the enemy to chop his head and hand together. It was a specialty which they had the know-how of doing it. So Rashi there comments, Rebbe spoke about it once at lunch. Why was this? Because they excelled in the mitzvah of tefillin. Being that they excelled in the mitzvah of tefillin, they were rewarded that they were able to take revenge on their enemies in zroya and in kotkoi. Zroya means on the arm and in kotkoi on the head. And talking about this in the Rebbe also stressed bechlal the importance of tefillin, that the whole idea of tefillin is l'shabed hamoyach v'halev. We put on tefillin on our heads and we put it on our arms opposite our heart. Why? Because this is the whole idea of tefillin, that a Yid has to be mishabed, has to dedicate his intellect and his emotion, which this is the main part of the person. The person is directed by his mind, by his intellect. His seichel directs him what to do, and his emotions direct him what to do. And by all of that, the person is guided. So Mamela, the obligation of a Yid is to take these 2 major factors that are within the person, his head and his heart, and this has to become mishubid, dedicated to the service of the Rebishter. Once this is dedicated to the service of the Rebishter, then his entire body is. The Rebbe also reminded that we are 10 days before Yud Shvat, and in conjunction with what was discussed at previous occasions, and the Rebbe began on Asara B'Tevis, which was 30 days before Yud Shvat, where we should prepare ourselves for the day of Yud Shvat by making additional shiurim and Torah and giving additional tzedakah and additional inyanim and avodah, and all of this should be done by each and every one of us on a daily basis. And at that time, the Rebbe suggested that we do it in intervals of 10 days. In other words, after every 10 days, to report whatever we have accomplished to our Rav. And our Rav, in turn, the Rebbe spoke initially about it the first time, he asked that we should permit our Rav, that the Rav should be permitted to release our information to the Rebbe and notify the Rebbe whatever each and every one of us has accomplished throughout these 3 10-day periods. And especially now that we are entering the 3rd cycle of 10 days, The Rebbe also added, we know the famous expression from the Frierdiker Rebbe, which was stressed by him very strongly. As es kemol nicht da kein verfallen, it is never too late. Meaning, even though there may be those amongst us who have not utilized the first 20 days properly, now we are entering the last and final stage of the last 10 days to make sure that all of these days are utilized properly in the right way by being meisef, adding on in Yonim and learning of Torah. Rebbe spoke about it the first time, in Yonim and Nigle, as well as in Yonim and Chsides, also to give tzedakah, and in Yonim and Avodah, during each and every one of these days. A gute Woche.